Welcome to the 6th episode of the yayQuery podcast, brought to you by TinyCDN and Devotee.
Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of the yayQuery podcast. I am Adam Sontag, a web developer based in New York City.
I'm Paul, Irish, front-end developer up in Boston, Massachusetts. Rebecca?
I'm Rebecca Murphey. I'm a front-end consultant down in Durham, North Carolina. Alex?
I am Alex Sexton. I'm a front-end web developer in Austin, Texas, the Lone Star State. Adam, what's up this week?
We have a lot going on in the wide world of jQuery and front-end development. We have, of course, jQuery 1.4 alpha's out, but there's a lot more going on. Most notably, we do a lot of work getting ready for this podcast using Etherpad, and we were, very scared this week. There was a lot going on. Etherpad, its future was hazy, but I think Paul can report some good news.
Yeah, definitely. If no one's used it before, just check out etherpad.com. It's a collaborative text editor. It's Ajax based. It's actually really impressive as far as what it does, and there's a time slider that lets you see all the revisions, and it's really sweet. But what happened is they said that they got bought by Google, and they're like, oh, we're shutting it down and everything's going to be down. Everyone freaks out and says this is horrible. But luckily they changed their mind, and they're like, you know what, we're actually going to release Etherpad as open source software. So before it's gone for good, it's going to be out as open source. So that's huge, and I think that the jQuery and the JavaScript community could use this a lot. It's really good with collaborating on code and debugging things. So I'm really excited to see what everyone's going to do with it.
Yeah, having an open source option for collaborative editing, I think would be pretty key. There's Google Wave, which is kind of who bought out Etherpad. But I think an open source option is always very welcomed. Moving on, this week, huge news in the JavaScript community, or as Papa Crockford would have us call it, the ECMAScript community, which has reached version 5. It was approved finally after
ratified.
A trillion years. Yeah, ratified. Hancock signed it, right? Just a quick, super duper fast overview of ECMAScript, since none of you will be able to use it for the next 10 years. It adds in accessor support, so get and set methods. It adds in strict mode, tamper-proof objects, so no more has-own property stuff if you are in that mode. Keyword collision, set some stuff, high-order array methods, which we kind of have underscore for now, and the browsers are kind of implementing. Native JSON, which is scary and fun all at the same time, and then function.prototype.bind, which is pretty sweet. My favorite part about that were the words that Dion had to say on the issue on Ajaxian, and I'll just quote him. And he says, let's have a big boo for IBM. Boo. For IBM for being so stuck up that they think their IEEE decimal position is so freaking important that warrants blocking everything. I am so sour from IBM in ECMA and JCP and ... And Intel for sleeping on the job and not having enough time to study the intellectual property implications of the standard. So both of those companies, IBM and Intel, voted no to the standard, even though it is pretty much ready to go. And I'm happy that it passed and that we're moving forward in the web.
The other big thing that we saw was jQuery won an award. It won an award at .NET Magazine as the Open Source Application of the Year. And Simon Willison, jQuery friend and co-creator of the Django Python framework, accepted the award. We're really, really happy about that.
So in sort of kind of related to jQuery news, I also just wanted to bring up, I thought we were going to see it today, but word on the street is that we're going to see it by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be out. Dojo's got their 1.4 release coming out this week. And I wouldn't normally bring this up, except one of the kind of neat things that they're introducing in this release is a bunch of jQuery-like methods on their node list prototype. And so basically this gives us a lot of, Dojo already has dojo.query, which is very similar to the $ function in jQuery. And this gives people using Dojo a lot of the same methods that we're accustomed to having in jQuery already. And so check out the release notes on Dojo 1.4. It could make it a slightly more familiar library to you if you are coming to it from jQuery and get thrown into it. There's a little bit of friendly territory there.
Yeah, Peter and Alex do a great job with that, and 1.4 looks really cool. Speaking of which, Rebecca, it's good to have you back. I'm glad you're back. Is feeling
back.
better.
My back is
that's
back.
A super big pun. Rebecca's a super big trooper for hanging with us this week. She's in pain, so ignore the painkillers.
I'm standing, and that's why I'm bouncing around a lot. I'm sorry.
Standing on the promises of
sure.
the new Google Analytics asynchronous loading script. Best segue of the episode right there.
Nice.
So, which was killed by that.
It's the segue of the week, and it's really, really great.
The segue of the week. That's funny. Okay. So Google released a new, faster way to load scripts. Previously, they were probably the slowest way. I think they used like document.write and eval all at one time or something. I don't know. It was pretty terrible. So they released a new script, which is pretty good. It's fast. There are faster ways to do it, as like forums have said. Also, just a quick note, if you're in IE and you put comments above your head tag right after the HTML tag, first child is used inside their new script, and your comment will show up as the first child and then break things. So they're fixing that, but honestly, if you're doing that, you probably have bigger problems. So.
Right, and then the other really cool part of the new analytics code was that they're using on their script tag that they write the async attribute. So this is part of HTML5, and it basically says, it's like take this script, but run it whenever. Like it doesn't need to block anything. Nothing is dependent on it, and so that's coming out. I think right now it's only implemented in Firefox 3.6, but we'll be seeing it, in more soon.
Cool. You came out with something pretty sweet this week, right, Paul?
Oh yeah, Modernizer, which is it's a small little JavaScript library that does feature detection for HTML5 and CSS3 properties. Basically, it looks to see what properties and features your current browser supports. We released a new update to it, so we have a plugin API. It also recognizes what audio and video formats the native audio and video tags support, and also checks a bunch of input attributes. And with that, you can do cool things like placeholder text, client-side validation, and it's part of HTML. Really cool stuff. So if you're interested in doing HTML5 and want to, follow by the old idea of progressive enhancement, definitely check out Modernizer because it really enables you to do a lot.
Yeah, if you catch a Mark Pilgrim's article, the Dive into HTML5 article, that's a really good way to kind of jump into HTML5, and he talks a lot about Modernizer, including the new 1.1 release already updated on his site. He's a great author.
Yep.
Straight up. Also, I just wanted a quick plug for our friend Boaz Sender, creator of Object Literals, from R. Murphy's inspiration.
Object Laterals, wasn't it?
Object Laterals. Sorry, not Object Literals. Object Laterals.
Objectlateral.js.
As a fellow uselessware creator of GoToJS, I really support the things he does, but this is not uselessware. Wantsforchristmas.com. Check it out. It is wildcard domain friendly, and so it's stuff.yournamehere.wantsforchristmas, and he has this sweet bookmarklet that you put in your top bar, and you can like drag images into it, and you create your Christmas list and send it to everybody, and it's awesome. Check that out.
It's rainbow.
And the other thing I just wanted to mention, I wanted to thank the jQuery podcast that had me on last week, where I actually talked a little bit more about Modernizer, and we talked about Boaz too. So to check out that, It's double the content, or at least double the length of this podcast. So it'll be a good time.
Check it out.
Lots of Paul.
Lots and lots.
You want to talk on the yayQuery party line? Dial 443-492-9783 or 443-4yayQuery. Go ahead, pick up that phone. We're waiting.
Guys, I'm really sad.
Why are you sad?
It's just, it's getting that time of year, and I just want someone to call the yayQuery party line.
It's hard, Adam. It's okay.
Well,
Somebody.
Adam, actually,
What's
we
that?
had
I
a
hear
call.
a phone ring. Who is it?
Is that a phone ring? Pick it up, Adam. Pick it up.
Hello?
Hey, this is Kerbasi. I had a question about Alpha 1 of 1.4 for jQuery. I was just wondering what's new, what's being updated. Is it performance update or new features? Being that it's been pushed out today, have you guys looked at it? Are you guys using it in live code? Thank you. Bye.
Peace out,
All right.
Kerbasi.
Thanks a
All
lot
right,
for the
we
call.
got a call.
Well, I'm glad that you asked about jQuery 1.4.
Why, what a good idea.
We have culled the commits. We have been out to the boondocks, and we're bringing it all back to you for Xmas time. But let's start with the best. Why don't we all talk about what our favorite new thing in jQuery 1.4 is? Paul, why don't you start us off?
My jQuery 1.4 Christmas present would probably be the new enhancement to the index method. It is a beautiful thing, and it may or may not have something to do with the fact that it came from a recommendation from me and AJ. So now in index, it has an API that is very familiar to jQuery developers, where you just take an element, you call index on it, and it returns the index of that element within its siblings. And that's typically,
that's kind of crazy.
it's lovely.
Novel.
I was kidding.
And
That's how it should work.
you can also pass it a selector as well, and it'll find that element within a selection.
Cool.
So there's a lot of fun to it, and I'm very happy to see that coming out, because the old style of using the index method was just really awkward. Alex, what's yours?
My favorite is a little bit obvious. I think this whole new version of jQuery focuses a lot on speed. So my favorite enhancement is the speed of jQuery, specifically in the the HTML DOMI type functions. So like append, prepend, attribute, I think was totally rewritten. Things like that. According to John Resig's State of jQuery 09 talk, which we have linked in the slide share in the notes, it is 3.5 times faster than 1.3.2, which is significant. So props for the speed. There's a lot of other things that are increased. So
yeah, there was actually the task speed library, which kind of like basic DOM operations figures out how fast all the common JavaScript libraries are. From 1.32 to 1.4, the time that it took jQuery to complete all the tasks basically dropped in half. It's significantly faster now, so you're probably going to be seeing a huge increase in your applications. I mean, it's coming along with plenty of extra enhancements and features, which we're going to talk about. But Rebecca, what was your favorite part of jQuery 1.4 that you've seen so far?
Well, y'all know that I'm kind of a little bit nuts about code organization and organizing code into objects and stuff, and so I am super excited to see jQuery start to provide a way to specify the scope that an event handler will run in. And so we basically get another argument that we can pass to the bind method to say the scope that we should use to run the method in. In the old bind prior to 1.4, the scope was always the element to which the event happened. And you could get around that with some kind of nasty looking closures, but this is just a really straightforward way to be able to change that scope, and so maybe provide an object that you've created as the scope instead of running the method in the scope of the element. So I am really excited to see that and to play with it. And Adam, how about you?
Yeah, I'm super psyched about that as well.
Yeah, we had to fight over that one.
But I'm really pumped about the fact that there's a lot of new events supported by Live. I'm really excited about the change event. It was like one of the last things to be committed before jQuery 1.4 went alpha. But one of the drawbacks to using Live was that there was just this certain set of events that didn't work because they didn't all, react the same in every browser. So we have fixes for submit and change and focus and blur, and now you can bind those things up using Live, or you can do event delegation using those events if you want. You don't necessarily have to use Live to use them, but we now can support all events bubbling up and down, and I'm really pumped because I have this application that's just been itching to have the change event propagate. So I have notes all over my code, and it's like, Merry Xmas.
Yeah, that's been a big asterisk next to that method, and that's going to be pretty cool to be able to take that away.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest enhancements as far as new features inside of jQuery 1.4. Yeah, entirely. But now for a short musical break.
You are a developer, an accelerator, an innovator, and I'm in a place to let you know your code is getting very, very old. Let's go. If it feels a little like a retro, that should be a clue. I'm letting you know. I'm gonna have to let you go. Oh no, you never update your code. It's old. I have tried to use it always fails. Oh no, now I've tried to send you lots of emails. Well, I'm gonna have to let you know. You know, you gotta update your code. It's old, incomplete, in defeat, off the beat, obsolete. You know, I have an idea. What if you update your code? You know, maybe the copyright header, just so that we know that the project's not dead and that you're alive. That would do it for me. That's all.
Okay, so I think that we talked a little bit about our favorite things in 1.4, but there's a whole lot more to go over, so we will be the comprehensive authority on 1.4. But first, guys, let's be honest, is this really 1.4, or is this, I went back and looked at John's JQCon slides, and he was talking about 1.33. This feels a lot like 1.33.
But it definitely is 1.4.
I know that they're calling it 1.4, but I went back and looked at what came out in 1.3 and what came out in 1.2 and what came out in 1.1, and back then we had really big changes happening in the code. Like in 1.3 we got Sizzle and we got Live, right. And this feels like we're just sort of fixing some things that we probably maybe should have done back in 1.3.2 or maybe 1.3.3.
I think you must be confused. I think you must be referring to the fact that in 1.3.2 they closed 30% less bugs than they did in 1.4, right? So that's since they closed more bugs for this revision, then that means it should be a lower version number. That's how those work, according to you?
Here's how I'm comforting myself is I keep thinking about the Snow Leopard release that just came out for OS X. It didn't really change anything. It just made everything better.
Oh, they
and so
didn't, not
it
expose.
Well, okay.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The theory was that they just made everything better, but I mean, is that sort of what we've got here? That the jQuery team just went in and dug into the internals and cleaned some stuff up, and that's the victory of 1.4.
Certainly there is a lot of improvements performance-wise. We know that there's great advances, but you know, like Alex said, there are 40% more tickets closed for 1.4 than for 1.3. And in addition to bug fixing, there's a lot of new features, I think.
I think that also certain features, even though they're kind of obvious, you know, like adding full DOM event support to the live thing, they were a big deal. So they represented they represented a major accomplishment. So I think that if that merits a full decimal point, then so be it. But by the same token, I think that we should maybe get out of the trees and take a look at the forest.
Oh, okay. We can
absolutely
look
right?
at the forest.
Right?
I think we should trust the jQuery developers to do the right thing as far as decimal releases and move on. What
Adam, I mean, you've been really digging into this. I mean, like you said, you've been looking at all the past commits, all the tickets that have been closing, Track, GitHub, Subversion, everywhere, and you have a really good handle. So why don't you lead us? Tell us kind of like what are the things that we're going to see here.
So yeah, everyone wants to know what's new. So let's run through the stuff. Right now in jQuery 1.4, there is a method called isObjectLiteral. It will be known for the rest of time as isPlaneObject. It's just sort of along the lines of jQuery isFunction, just is able to tell you whether or not the variable you pass to it is an object that is not a constructor. It's just, you know, was an object literal, basically. We got $param was refactored by our good friend Ben Allman. To handle more gracefully nested objects and arrays. He worked with Yehuda Katz on that, so I'm sure that everyone who wants to pass super nested data structures is psyched about that.
Yeah, I think that works better with Ruby, and then he also has the dparam method in his barbecue plugin, BBQ. You can find that on his site.
And then we have FN add, the add method. The cool thing here is that now it can actually take a context. So you can pass in a selector string followed by a context and add that to your collection, which makes a lot of sense if you're grabbing stuff, doing stuff with it, then adding more stuff to it and doing stuff with that. So there's a lot more flexibility. Also, it always returns in document order, which may be important to you.
We got another thing from Ben Allman, parents until, next until, and prev until. So in the spirit of the holidays, allowing you to more to get closer to the relatives that are closest to you faster. So that's what we could say about those methods.
And those basically work just by they get you everything until you hit a matching selector. That's the idea.
Right. It's like next all, but until you hit something that you don't want.
Okay, cool. And speaking of family,
unwrapping presents around this time of year, we got unwrapping jQuery objects is elements is another part of jQuery 1.4. Just allows you to take an element and remove whatever it's contained and put it back at the prior level in the DOM hierarchy.
So don't you think this is like, shouldn't they call this method like CPS? Like you take the children away from the parents and put them back into, like, I don't know. There's a joke in there somewhere. We'll move on though.
I liked it. I think I hope this makes it in.
CPS. Okay, to the jQuery team, rename unwrap to CPS.
Is that Child Protection Services?
Yeah. Child Protection Services. Yeah.
I think just
you know what? I think that
So
we can agree to have a raise money for all the elements that are orphaned by the unwrapped.
Orphan,
Lose their
exactly. Or
parents.
we could just
So sad.
we could just call it like Annie or something, and everybody would
Orphan
know.
Annie. Daddy Warbucks
Yeah.
is the rapper div.
Speaking of abandoning, we've got full support for window on before unload. So
Yeah.
when users are about to abandon your page, you'll be able to bind to that event reliably using jQuery cross-browser. Used to be a little tricky. I know there are some caveats to that.
Like it's completely nefarious.
It's We've heard some nasty stories. Also, you don't really want to be trying to do anything that needs to happen asynchronously in a window on before unload
Right,
handler.
commonly some people want to report that the user clicked an outbound link and then they're now leaving the page. Won't work with an AJAX, but you can actually force your AJAX request to be synchronous and get it in that way. But on before unload is pretty sweet, so it's good to have the extra little fixes in there for full support.
Just in case some of you beginner developers don't know on before unload, since it's kind of a new event, that's the event that fires right before they close out of the page for any reason, barring like some sort of crash. So if you try to exit out of Google Docs while you're writing a document and it pops up a little thing that says, "Are you sure?" That's on the on before unload event. So just throwing that out there.
If you try to X out of like stevesmoneytreeonline.com,
It'll also
that's
give you a
that's the window
confusing
on
question
before
like,
unload.
do you not want to not exit out of this page backwards?
That's the on before unload, baby.
All right, and I think that's time for our
They're hidden enhancements.
What?
The little tiny things you never thought you'd see.
Oh.
Okay, so we have our hidden enhancement. Sorry, portmanteaued. Is the new events, or not new events? It's native events that are native to your browser. Can be used with the jQuery bind function. A lot of people limit this to the shortcut events, click and change and submit, and all these on before unload now is officially kind of supported. But pretty much any event that your browser throws, you can hook in with jQuery. I mean, it's not specific to any group of events. So these are DOM events, these are mutation events, context menu, scroll wheel. All these, that also goes on to include the mobile world with like touch events and things like that the browsers include. So all that is supported, and you can bind to it just like you would anything else. So that's just a simple, quick hit enhancement for you to know that you don't have a limited event scope. And obviously it goes on to custom events that you define as well.
I gotta say that this whole week, unwrapping jQuery 1.4 for me feels like hidden enhancements galore. So let's get
giant hidden enhancement.
We've got new in jQuery 1.4. We have an enhancement to the toggle class method. Previously, you could only use it to work on one class at a time. Now you can use it with no arguments or with Boolean arguments to toggle the original classes that were on the element, whatever they were. And you can use it with multiple classes to toggle each one of the classes, which results in fewer function calls and is just neater.
Adam, is it like remembering what it had, or how does that work?
It uses the jQuery data cache, which is a great thing to use in your own code to store the original class state and refer back to it in the event that you ask for it back.
Cool.
A couple nifty traversal methods have been sped up, EQ and get, in addition to now supporting negative indexes, so you can select from the back of the set, are a bit faster.
Quick question about negative indexes. Is that also supported inside the selector, the actual selector string, or just the functions? Does anyone know? Is that a good question?
I can't imagine that it would not be.
Okay.
Sorry, you can't. No, you actually can't pass.
Yeah, I thought that was an old caveat.
The EQ filter inside a selector string, you cannot pass negative indexes, but you can pass the EQ method all sorts of negative things.
So maybe we should try to get that into, see if we can get that into the 1.4 release. I think that's good.
I don't. To be honest, I don't think people should be using the EQ
filter
selector filter. It's much slower, and it's just going to be a lot quicker if they just use the methods. So.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
And on the lines of being able to use a method versus a filter, there are now methods in 1.4 called first and last. So you don't have to do elements filter last or elements filter first. You can just do a first method, which is basically EQ0.
Right, and those are specifically the sped up methods. First and last are the super sped up methods in EQ. So those are your biggest performance boosts.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to see those because I think I was playing with XUI and it had first and last or something like that, and then I came back to jQuery and kept trying to use them. They're pretty obvious methods that just in the world of jQuery it seems like they ought to be there. So it's pretty cool they are now.
We have another nifty thing, which is that if you happen to be trying to work with text nodes with jQuery, you can use the text method on them. Useful. It's better than jQuery destroying the value of the text node when you call the text node on it. More useful is the fact that the hover method now can take one function as an argument. A lot of the time, one reason is you want to use toggle class or some other toggle method rather than have two functions, one that adds on mouse over and then one that removes on mouse leave. Now you can just do toggle class. I know that sometimes people screwed this up in prior releases, so now it'll be handled a little bit more gracefully too.
Yeah, one thing that kind of freaks me out about this is that a lot of people when they're starting, they'll be like, oh, I want something to happen when you hover over something. They'll forget that hover is supposed to take two methods, well, at least it used to, and they'll just bind one, and now that one function is going to be executed when they leave, and I think it might trip up a few developers, but it's certainly it's very nice for people that want to be able to handle both events and toggle between the two. So it should be really cool and allow you to write more concise code.
So Paul, it sounds like you're worried that hover, you're going from 2 down to 1, back to 2, from 1. Is that an anti-pattern?
Is it?
Or no, I don't. That's not an anti-pattern.
Let me tell you about an anti-pattern.
All Irish's jQuery. Anti-pattern for performance of the week. Bum bum.
So the anti-pattern that we're going to talk about in the spirit of 1.4 and kind of what we went through to bring this episode to you is the anti-pattern is treating jQuery as a black box. So just kind of like accepting it as it does this awesome stuff for you, and I love it for it. I think that's a nice way to start out. But certainly digging into the source is a great way to not only get used to better methods and better ways to approach the way that you write your application code, but also you're going to learn a lot about actual syntax and how JavaScript works, better approaches to problems. So my big recommendation here is to bookmark the jQuery source in the bookmark bar, have it extremely easy and available to get to, and just refer to it. Whenever you have a question, I find that I go to the source far more than I go to the docs because it just tells me straight out exactly what I need to know. And I also want to point out our anti-pattern of the week from last week, which was don't operate on an empty jQuery set. This actually came up when we were looking through 1.4. There was actually a bug fix when you called the load method, the Ajax load method, on something that didn't exist. It actually threw an error. So that'll be fixed in 1.4, but it just goes to show.
Shouldn't do it.
It's an anti-pattern for a reason.
Shouldn't anti-pattern, or we'll catch you.
Never anti-pattern.
ever.
What's up in 1.4? More so than what we've already covered, Adam.
There is more in 1.4. Official slogan of the jQuery 1.4 project. We have delay, which leverages the animate property to just pause execution to the middle of the jQuery chain. This is credited to Clint Helfers, but Paul looks like he has a Paul face.
A good friend of ours on the interwebs, he goes by Nologax, but we know him as Jonas. Really smart developer from Stockholm, and he a while ago posted a wait plugin, and you can find it on the docs under Cookbook. The Cookbook wait, and it uses Q and DQ and a set timeout. And the actual code that got committed for the delay method is extremely similar. So if anyone would be credited, I'm sure that Clint is a great guy, but
let's not tag him in the Twitter. Sorry, we love you, Clint. You're awesome.
Yes, nothing against you.
Awesome.
Sometimes great ideas are had twice.
It's minds think alike, but let's move on to visible and hidden.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So now visible and hidden are mutually exclusive sets. There were some bugs in visible and hidden where you could end up where like an element that had width but no height would show up in both. They were buggy. It's less buggy. Visible and hidden pseudo selectors. We have some optimizations. One thing we're talking about is in array tests for array index of the native function. If that exists, it's going to use that, so you'll pick up some performance gain. If you are using jQuery, passing it a simple HTML string like div on the fly, it's optimized to see if you're passing a single tag, so that it can parse that instead of doing the whole document fragment append thing. It just does a document create element. It's a bit faster. Along the lines of native support, again, we have native JSON support in getJSON,
which is great. I mean, it's fast, but the one thing that the yayQuery team would like to point out is, I mean, if anything is going to break your code when you upgrade to 1.4, I think it's going to be this. So the native implementation of JSON, JSON.parse, which is when you pass in JSON, what happens when it turns it into an object. It's really, really picky. It's a lot more picky than what we had been using before. So refer to the JSON spec on json.org. Most notably, keys need to be surrounded in double quotes, but that's the one thing that you really got to watch out for as you move up.
And now I think it's time for the plugin.
It's the plugin of the week, and it's really, really great. It's the plugin of the week. Yeah!
So the plugin of the week is jQuery Masonry. Really smart plugin coming from David DeSandro of Maryland. Beautiful demos, but basically what it does is it allows you a sort of layout that standard floats don't allow, kind of like the newspaper style of blocks that are in columns and following each other. Brings a lot of control to how you kind of want to lay things out. And it happens to integrate really well with the plugin that I wrote called Infinite Scroll. So there's a great demo on the site, but you can scroll down to the bottom of your browser. New stories will be loaded in, laid out in this grid, and just kind of, it's really solid. So check that out.
In order to mention Ben Elman for the third time in a single episode, it reminds me, I think it might be able to use in conjunction well with his funnily named Even Bottoms plugin, which takes your columns and makes them have even bottoms. But I just like the name of that.
That's not one of his hip-hop songs?
It's both. It's a crossover hit between plugin and song. So check out Even Bottoms by Ben Allman as well. Back to jQuery 1.4.
And then there's one pretty awesome, exciting enhancement, which is that you can now safely insert map elements. So if you're doing areas
map elements?
What?
Yeah.
Area?
What? Why
I
would
know
I
we
use a
just
map element?
We know we talked about jQuery.map a couple of weeks ago, but this is the good old school HTML map element. So if you, I don't know,
Wow.
have a picture of the Mona Lisa and you're trying to have different parts of her face linked to different pages.
No, Souders in high-performance websites recommends using image maps in certain cases where you might otherwise load a bunch of images. So do not mock the map. Now that book was also written in 2007, so I don't know what to say,
but anyway, yeah, much like key bodies, there are certain elements that are wrapped automatically differently when they're created. So maps needed to be put inside of an area, and jQuery now does that correctly, so that you can do all the map manipulation your cartographic heart may desire. And then one more big enhancement that we were all pretty excited about is the fact that a whole mess of functions now take functions as arguments. The attribute method, val, CSS, HTML, text, they're all supposed to be able to take functions so that you don't have to do an each when you're using those methods as setters. But we ran into a little bump in testing. Why don't you tell us more, Paul?
So they're really cool, but I think they could be better. The way that I would want to use this, like let's say I pass a function into the HTML method, I would want to kind of manipulate the current HTML, return a value that will be set to the new HTML. But it doesn't pass in the current value of the HTML, and you actually have to query for it. So as it stands right now, it actually feels just like a standard each. If you're passing a function into each.
Yeah, it's just an alias to each.
I gotta disagree, though, that it would be. I think that you can't expect that people are always going to want that value, and so getting that value is costly enough that I'm not sure it's worth it. I mean, think
well,
if
then
you
they
had,
wouldn't
like,
have passed a function into the HTML method
right.
at all. Right?
I mean, you should have just been using.
I don't know. I mean, they might just want access to the element itself as this.
What's the use
and
case
then
over each?
Because then maybe you want to get this .adder and take some part of the adder and change the HTML based on it, or something like that, or change some part of like a title attribute, or take a title attribute, use it somehow to determine what the HTML for the element will be. You never need the HTML of the element because you're actually just replacing it. So I don't know. I think there are use cases where you wouldn't want that, and the cost of getting it could be high enough to make it not worth it.
I guess we'll see what everyone's verdict is on that, and go forward from there.
Yeah. The one other cool thing that dropped was we actually saw this as a release recently from James Podolsky. He wrote a plugin for per property easing. So let's say that you want to animate something, but the left should have an easing function of linear, but your y-axis should be animated like ease out bounce. So you can now do that, and it's going to be part of jQuery core. The yayQuery sing-along plugin comes along with the yayQuery bouncing ball plugin, and it actually makes use of this functionality. So if you want to see it put to use, you'll see the bouncing lyrics ball. It's badass.
And there's our explicitness for the week. That was it right there.
It's the yayQuery Beginner's Corner, where everything is new. It's the yayQuery Beginner's Corner. I'm a newbie, what are you?
All right, well, that was our overview of 1.4, and we dug kind of deep into that, so now we have a little something for anybody who made it this far and maybe didn't understand everything that we actually talked about. This beginner's corner, just wanted to talk about a thing that I saw actually just this week, where somebody had gone and they had found a plugin or some snippet of code out on the web, and it was responsible for animating the background images of an element. And the code snippet had like a speed variable and a width variable and like the different variables related to the element that was going to have the background image moved. Well, in this person's case, they wanted to actually have 3 elements with background images that moved. And so what they did was they created a speed 1 variable and a speed 2 variable and a speed 3 variable. And a width 1 variable, width 2, width 3, etc. So my beginner's corner pattern, anti-pattern, whatever you want to call it, of the week would be if your variables or your function names or whatever have numbers in them, you probably need to step back and think about what you're doing. Because one of the basic principles of writing code is don't repeat yourself. And that's a case where you're clearly repeating yourself. So what I had the person do in this case was they had a list of values that were all the same type. And when you have a list of values, you probably want to put them in an array. So if you have a list of key value pairs, then you probably want to put them in an object. So anyway, if you find yourself with functions or variable names or whatever that have number 1, 2, 3 or A, B, C or whatever, then you probably want to take a second look at what you're doing and see if there's a better way to structure the data that you're using.
Okay, so that is the end of our episode. We would like to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, which is TinyCDN, content delivery for the masses, and Devotee for all your expression engine needs.
Alright, and like Alex said, that is it for us this week. Check us out on yayQuery.com. Check out our iTunes RSS feeds. We've got audio and video. And don't forget to give us a call on the party line, 443-4yayQuery. And like Adam just had up there, you can always catch us on Twitter at yayQuery too. So hey, thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.